Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, 21a of Maseches Megillah, and we're starting a new parak. We're starting from the Mishnah, and we're beginning the third parak. Says the Mishnah, HaKores HaMegillah, one who is reading the Megillah, Omeid V'Yoshev, he could stand or he can sit. There's no requirement to stand while reading the Megillah. Kara Echad, Karua Shnayim, Yatsu. If one person is reading it, or if two people are reading it at the same time, even though normally we would say you can't hear so well when two people are reading the same thing, but yet you can be Yotze, you can fulfill your obligation by hearing the Megillah read from two people at the same time. Makom shenagu levarich, yivarich. In places where they make a bracha on the reading of the Megillah, then you should make the bracha, if that's the minhag, if that's the custom. Vishelo levarich, and the places where the minhag is not to make a bracha, lo yivarich, one should not make the bracha. We'll see in the Gemara that it's actually talking about the bracha afterwards, the bracha before. Everybody says, okay. Now the Mishnah shifts to talk now about halachos relating to Kriyas HaTorah, reading the Torah. So it says, Basheni v'chamishi b'Shabbos, Basheni v'chamishi, on Monday and Thursday, and b'Shabbos b'mincha, and at mincha on Shabbos, korin shlosha. There are 3 aliyos when you read the Torah at those times. Ein pochsim and ve'ein mosifin alein. Can't do less than 3, you can't do more than 3. Ve'ein maftirin b'navi. And there's no haftarah, you don't read from the Nevi'im, from the prophets afterwards. That's Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos mincha, 3 aliyos, no haftarah. Haposeach v'hachosem b'Torah mevarach u'fanei l'achariah. And, says the Mishnah, the one who opens up the reading and the one who closes the reading, they are the ones who make the brachos. And the Gemara is going to, not our Gemara today, but later the Gemara will elaborate on what that means. B'Roshei Chadashim u'v'cholo shel moed, on Rosh Chodesh and on Chol HaMoed, Korin Arba. Then we have 4 aliyahs, 4 people read. In Pochsim, you can't have less, you can't have more. Being Maftir and Benavi, and there's no haftarah. Now in these 2 instances, whether it's the weekday or it's Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed, so certainly on weekdays and Rosh Chodesh people work and they have places to go. So that's why we don't add aliyahs and we don't have haftarah. Even on Chol HaMoed, there are some people who work, and therefore we don't want to add aliyahs. Shabbos Mincha, because often it's towards the end of the day, and so we limit it to 3 aliyahs, and no haftarah. Okay, and again it says, Ha-poseach v'ha-chosem b'Torah mevarach u'fanei l'achariah. The one who opens up the reading and the one who closes it would make a bracha before and after. The simple understanding of this is that only the first person getting aliyah and says the opening bracha, and the last person getting aliyah says the last bracha, but nobody in between. But when the Gemara gets to it, we'll see the discussion. Zakwa. So here's the rule, says the Mishnah. Kol sheyesh bo musaf ve'eno yom tov karing arba. So with regards to 4, if it's a day that has musaf, karba musaf, davening musaf, and it's not a Yom Tov, it's not a day that's prohibited from work, so then you have 4 aliyahs. So that's Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, they have a Musaf, and they are not a Yom Tov per se. You can work. Again, Chol HaMoed, it depends, but it's not Yom Tov. B'Yom Tov, now on Yom Tov itself, Chamisha. So on Yom Tov of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah, so then you have 5 aliyahs. B'Yom HaKippurim, Shisha. And on Yom Kippur, there are 6 aliyahs. B'Shabbos, Shiva. And on Shabbos, you have 7. Ein pochsim mehan, you can't have less than that. Aval mosifin alein, but you could have more than 7. And it sounds like it's saying that even by Yom Tov and Yom Kippur, you could technically have more, although I don't think that's done, so it could be that that's not actually the halacha. Umaftirim b'navi. And on all these days, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, and Shabbos, we have maftir, we have a haftarah. haposeach ve'achosim b'torah mevarach v'nachar. And again, the same thing. The one who opens, the one who closes, they are the ones who make the bracha before and after. Okay. Says the Gemara, going back to the first line, it said that the Megillah you can read either standing or sitting. Says the Gemara, Tana was taught ma she'ein king b'Torah, as opposed to when you're reading from the Torah, you may not sit. The one reading the Torah has to stand. Mina hanimili. Ask the Gemara, what is the source for that? Where do we know that from? So Rabbi Abo says, Damar Kra, because the pasuk says, Ve'ata po amodi madi. Hashem says to Moshe, after the revelation at Har Sinai, he says, everybody could go back to their tents, and you, ata po amodi madi, you stand here with me. And the continuation of that is, and I will speak to you all the mitzvos and the laws that you should teach the people. So we see that when Hashem is going to teach Moshe, he says, you should stand with me. So we see that, we see, first of all, that Hashem, as V'am Rabbi Bo, actually, let's see this one more line, V'am Rabbi Bo, Ilmole mikra kasav yafshar la'amro. If not for a pasuk that said that, we couldn't say it ourselves. It sounds like even HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing, because he says, you stand with me, as if I'm standing. So whatever that means, it's not to be taken literally that Hashem is standing, but that's how it's described. So the one teaching Torah is standing, and the one receiving is standing. Amodi madi, stand with me. So from there we learn that when you read the Torah, you should stand. Now it would imply here that also when you're listening to the Torah, you should stand. But that doesn't seem to be the common practice, but at least the one reading the Torah must be standing. V'amar Rabbi Abo, and Rabbi Abo said, Minayin l'rav shelo yeshiv al gabe mita v'yishana l'talmido al gabe karka. How do we know that the Rebbe shouldn't be sitting on a couch or on a chair while everybody else is sitting on the floor, on the ground? Shenemar v'ata po amodi madi, because the pasuk says that Hashem said to Moshe, you should stand with me, meaning that Hashem was saying we should be on even, again, kavayachal, so to speak, even territory when I'm teaching you the Torah. And we learn from there that a rabbi should be on even ground with his students when he's teaching them Torah. So if they are sitting on the ground, he should sit on the ground. If he's sitting on a chair, they should sit on chairs. Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, continuing this line of thinking, that from the days of Moshe until Rabbi Gamliel, they would learn Torah standing. And that's what it sounds like from the pasuk, that's how it should be done. But when Rabbi Gamliel died, so then sickness entered the world, weakness entered the world, and they began to learn sitting down. And that's the meaning of the Mishnah that says, at the end of Sota, it says, Mishameis Rabbi Gamliel, when Rabbi Gamliel died, or Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, Batal Kavu Torah, the honor of Torah was nullified, because it used to be that people would stand for learning Torah and give it proper honor. After that, we became too weak to do so, and Batal Kavu Torah, the honor of Torah was nullified after that, was diminished. Okay. Kasav Echad Omer. Now, on the one hand, we have a pasuk that says, Moshe Rabbeinu describes, I think this is in, maybe in Parshas Ekev, he says, Va'eshe Bahar, I sat, it's in Sefer Devarim, I sat on the mountain. For 40 days and 40 nights. He describes that he was sitting there when Hashem was teaching him the Torah. Because of Echad Omer, another pasuk says, Ve'anochi amadti bahar. He says, I stood on the mountain. So which one is it? One place he says, I sat. And then another place, the very next chapter, in Devarim Yud, he says, I stood. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? Did he sit or did he stand? So Amar Rav said, Omed velomed, he would stand when he was learning for the first time. Yoshe b'shon, and then when he was reviewing, he would sit. Rabbi Chanina Amar, Rabbi Chanina says, Lo omed v'lo yoshev. He wasn't standing nor sitting, ela shocha. He was bowing or leaning. So something in between standing and sitting, that's why it says in one place standing, one place sitting. Rabbi Yochanan says, it's not a contradiction in the first place. Ein yeshiva al lashon hakava. Yeshiva doesn't mean sitting, it means remaining. I remained there. Shenemar vateshu b'kadesh yamim rabim. It says about the Jewish people that they were teshev in Kadesh for many days. They weren't sitting the whole time, they were dwelling there. They were remaining there. So when Moshe says, Va'eshev bahar, I was eshev on the mountain, he doesn't mean I sat there, he means I remained there. But he was standing when he was learning. Rava Amar, finally Rava has a different answer. He says, Rakos me'umad v'kashos miyushav. It depends what it was. The things that were easier to understand and to hear, the softer things, those he stood for. But kashos, the more difficult things, that he had to sit down for. And so he did both. Some things he stood for, some things he sat for. Okay, so we have various reconciliations of this contradiction if he was standing or sitting. Okay, the Gemara continues with the next part of the Mishnah. Kara echad kara shnayim yatsu. It says that when it comes to the Megillah, whether one person is reading it or even if two people are reading it at the same time, you can be Yotze, you can fulfill your obligation by listening to them. Top of the next page, it says, Tana, it was taught, Mashe Inking Batorah. As opposed to when reading from the Torah, you can't have two people read at the same time. We have a rule that Treikali lo mishtamai, that you can't hear two voices at the same time. We'll have to see why Megillah is an exception, but you cannot listen to Torah reading because you can't hear two voices at once. So you can't have two people reading the Torah. Tana Rabban, it was Tana Rabban, so the rabbis taught, but Torah, when it comes to reading the Torah, echad karei ve'echad metargim. One person should read, and you get one person being metargim. Metargim was the one who announced the translation into Aramaic for the congregation. Only one person should be doing that. But don't think that you can have one person reading and two people being metargim. You certainly can't have two people reading, but you can't even have two people being metargim. Why not? Because the metargim, the translator, was he was translating so people would understand the Torah. So if two people would be saying it at the same time, you wouldn't hear well, you wouldn't be able to understand. When it comes to Navi, echad karei v'shnayim metargimin. When it comes to Navi, when it comes to reading the Haftorah, or perhaps teaching Navi, you can have one person reading and two people translating. But again, you shouldn't have two people reading the Navi and two people translating. So I think this is when it comes to Haftorah. So you need to hear the Haftorah. So only one person can read the Haftarah, you can't have two. But in terms of the Targum, the translation, it's not as essential to hear and understand the translation of Navi. It doesn't have mitzvos in it. So that wasn't, if it was two people doing that, you could still be Yotze. As opposed to by Torah, where everybody needs to understand the mitzvos, they have to make sure they hear, well, you can't have two people saying it at the same time. Uva halal, uva Megillah. Actually, many take out the word halal, so uva Megillah. When it comes to Megillah, afilu asara korin, basara metargim. You can even have 10 people reading it at the same time, or 10 people translating it. Again, some take that out. 10 people translating it. You don't generally translate the Megillah, I guess. So, but you can even have 10 people reading it. Says the Gemara, my taima. What is the reason that it's okay to? What is the reason that it's? I'll just go back to that point about the 10 people translating. So Rashi actually says it should be taken out because there is no Targum on the Megillah. Obviously, we have later Targum. We call it Targum Sheni. There might be another Targum Yerushalmi, but the classic Aramaic translation we don't have. So on any of Ksuvim of the writings, so Rashi says there's no idea of having a Targum on the Megillah. So that should be taken out. It shouldn't say and 10 translating. Just you can even have 10 reading. Why? My taima. What's the reason? Kivan de chaviva. Since it's so dear, yahavi daitayu v'shami. People will be very careful to hear, and they'll be able to listen. So fascinating, Gemara, that first of all that Megillah is so unique because it's so dear, it's so special. But secondly, that actually we're saying that it's possible to hear when two people read at the same time, to hear the words. You just have to pay really close attention. And only something that's very special to you will you do so for. So only for the Megillah do we allow that. Okay, then the Mishnah is saying, Makom shenagol levarech yivarech. In a place where the minhag is to make a bracha on the Megillah, you should make a bracha. In a place where it is not the minhag, not the custom, then you should not. Amar Abaye, Abaye said, Lo shano ela lachareha. That was only taught after the reading of the Megillah. Aval lefanea, but before the reading of the Megillah, mitzvah levarech, there's a mitzvah to make a bracha. De Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rabbi Yehuda saying the name of Shmuel, kol mitzvahs, kulan, all mitzvahs, mevarech, alein, over las yasam. You make a mitzvah, you make a bracha before you do them. Okay, there are some exceptions, the commentaries discuss why, but for most mitzvahs, you make a bracha before you fulfill them. Megillah is no different, you have to make a bracha before you fulfill it, says Abaye. So the whole question is only, the situation where it depends on your minhag is for the bracha after the Megillah. Now, this is actually a very common line in the Gemara, that it quotes this idea that mitzvahs here mevarech over lasiyasan, which means before you do them. And every time the Gemara asks the following, "My mashmadai over lishna dakdumi." Where do we have that the word over? Where is it implied that the word over means before, in advance? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says Amar Kra, because the pasuk says in Shmuel Beis, it says Vayaratz Achimatz derech hakikar. And Achimatz ran towards the plain. Vayavar es Akushi, and he passed the Kushite. So Vayavor is to go in front of. So we see over means to be in front of. Abaye Amar Mehach. Abaye is another source. It says Vayavram Avinu. Sorry, actually, no, this is not. I think this is by Yosef. So it says, V'hu avar lifnehem, and he passed before them, I think before the brothers. So Yosef passed before the brothers, I believe. But again, it says he passed in front of them, so avar is to go in front of. If you want, you could say from here, Vayavor malkom lifnehem v'Hashem berosham. And it says, in Micha, it says, and their king passed before them, and Hashem was at their heads. But again, it means passed in front of them. So we have a number of places where we see that Vayavor means to pass in front. So over is a language of in front. Over las yasam, and therefore we say any bracha has to be recited over las yasam before one does the mitzvah. Okay, lefanei my mevarich. What bracha does one make before reading the Megillah? Rav Sheshes mikartazia ikla lekamed Rav Sheshes Rav Ashi. Rav Sheshes of mikartazia went in front of Rav Ashi ubarech manach. He made the bracha of manach. Manach's not a bracha. Manach stands for Megillah, Nes, and Chaim, I guess. The bracha of Al Mikra Megillah, the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim, that Hashem did miracles for us, and the bracha of Shachiyanu, the third bracha. So those are the brachas that you make before reading the Megillah. Now, what bracha do you make after reading the Megillah? Again, that is dependent on minhag, but our minhag is to make it. But what is the bracha? So it says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, blessed are you Hashem, our God, King of the world, King of the universe, harav es rivenu, the one who fights our fights, v'hadar esinenu, and judges our judgments, v'anokem es, or it could be, I guess, harav es rivenu, is he fights those who fight us, and hadar esinenu judges those who judge against us, v'anokem es nikmasenu, and takes revenge, avenges our vengeance, V'anifra lanu mitzorenu, and he pays, really he punishes our enemies for us, and repays the punishment to all of our enemies. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem hanifra v'yisrael mikol tzareihem, the one who pays the Jewish people's enemies to save them from their enemies. Rava Amar, Rava says Hakel HaMoshiach, that you should say Hakel, that the bracha is, or the closing bracha is Hakel HaMoshiach, the God who saves. Amar Papa said Hilkach Nimrinu L'Tarbayu. So let's just combine the two. Let's combine what the Gemara first said, which is that the closing of the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem HaNifra L'Yisrael Mikol Tzareihem, and with what Rava said, which is Hakel HaMoshiach, and we should say both. Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem HaNifra L'Yisrael Mikol Tzareihem, the one who protects the Jewish people by punishing their enemies. Hakel HaMoshiach, the God who saves. Okay, continuing on. The Gemara says, B'sheni v'chamishi v'shabbos b'mincha korin shlosha. So we said that on Monday and Thursday, and at Mincha and Shabbos, there are 3 aliyahs. Hani shlosha kenegami. Why 3? What do the 3 correspond to? What are they meant to represent? So, Amar Rav Asi, keneged Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim. They're meant to correspond to that there's 3 parts of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. We don't read all of them, but the 3 aliyahs from the Torah are alluding to the 3 parts of Torah, of Tanakh, of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, Tanakh. Rava Amar, Rava says, Kineged Kohanim Levim V'Yisraelim. No, it's to correspond to the 3 types of people, and actually that's who generally is supposed to get the aliyahs. Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. That's why there's 3 aliyahs. Ella, so now what about Hadatani Rav Shimi, Ein Pochsin Miyud Psukim Bebeis HaKnesses? You have to have at least 10 psukim. Vayidaber Olam Yaming, Vayidaber, even though it's a common pasuk that doesn't have anything specific to learn out from it, other than that Hashem spoke to Moshe, Vayidaber Shem Moshe Lemor, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, that counts as 1 of the 10. So you need 3 aliyahs and a total of at least 10 psukim. Okay. Hani Asara Knegami. Why 10 psukim? What are the 10 psukim supposed to correspond to? So Amar Rav Shulman Levi, Kinegeg Asara Baton Shabeis HaKnesses. They're to correspond to the 10, literally, idlers that are in the shul. The idea, in larger cities, back in the day, we have a similar thing called a kollel, but they would have people who would sit in the shul and learn, and they'd be there to daven and to help with minyarim and things. So and there were typically 10 of them, and that made you a city. We had that earlier in Megillah. That's made you a big city, and so that we have 10 psukim matching up to the 10 batlanim. I don't know what the significance of that is. Further research, I guess. Rav Yosef Amar Kenegeg Aseres HaDibros. Rav Yosef says it's to correspond to the 10 commandments. Shenemru l'Moshe b'Sinai, that were said to Moshe at Har Sinai. So we have 10, at least 10 psukim to correspond to the 10 commandments. And maybe that makes sense. The 10 commandments, we know famously that Aseres HaDibros, they hint to all of the Torah within them, so we want to kind of reference them. Okay, skipping the parentheses. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Knegeg Asara Ma'amaros Shebahen Nivra Ha'olam. The 10 psukim are to correspond to the 10 statements with which Hashem created the world. Hey Ninu, and what are they? Vayomer de Bereshis. All the Vayomer is the beginning of Bereshis, of the creation of Genesis. Ask the Gemara, Hangi Tishav, but if you count them, there's only 9 in the creation story. Says the Gemara, Bereshis Nami Maimarhu. No, the word Bereshis, the Torah begins, Bereshis Bar Elokim. The word Bereshis was a statement of Hashem. Let there be a beginning. Creation of time, creation of space. How do we know? T'chsev, because it says, Bidvar Hashem Shamayim Nasu, with the word of Hashem the heavens were created. V'rach piv kol tzavam, and with the breath of his mouth, all of the legions. But it says with the word of Hashem the heavens were created. So Bereshis Bar Elokim as the Shamayim V'Haaretz. In the beginning Hashem created the heaven and earth. Well, with what? Right? So here in Tehillim it says, Bidvar Hashem Shamayim Nasu. it says, by the word of Hashem the heavens were created. Okay, so another idea, the 10 psukim, we want at least 10 to correspond to the 10 statements of creation. Again, something important to recall at all times, that Hashem created the world with 10 statements. Okay, we'll continue here next time.